without GPUs, there is no machine learning or AI. Access to AI is heavily controlled by a few players. If you don't have $100 million in your bank account and not funded by Amazon, Google, or Microsoft, it's impossible to get high density compute. Our big priority right now is to increase supply. And the way we're going to do that is through incentives. And we have about $300 million for deploying these incentives.
Welcome to the Bare Metal Podcast.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning back into the Bare Metal Podcast. I am your Ship to Code from Rockaway X. And today I've got here with me the legend Greg Osuri of Akash. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Akash, super interesting and dare I say unique project, especially in the Cosmos workspace, focusing on compute. Super interested to dig into it, but also interested in how you guys got started. What was the reason to build Akash in the first place? How old is the project?
Well, I've been working on Akash for about 10 years.
Oh, wow.
So it really began when I found a passion for building developer tooling, right? So let's say, before Akash, I founded a company called AngelHack. AngelHack was the largest hackathon-based accelerator in the world. We helped launch several incredible companies at AngelHack, right? So Firebase launched an AngelHack. I believe Lambda Labs was also ideated at one of the AngelHacks. I don't, it's what I heard from secondhand. A lot of incredible projects came out of it. A common theme at AngelHack happened to be developers, rapidly build projects at a hackathon, and when they have to scale out to their users, that tends to be challenging, right? So because the pattern of building and deploying at a hackathon is not aligned with the pattern of scalability on AWS. So I took that as a challenge, to solve that friction, to scale, and fell in love with this new concept called containers. This is in 2012, 2013 timeframe, and Heroku was doing containers, but not at a open source level, and I really wanted to work on containers. This is before Docker came around, right? So, and Docker came and made containers super simple to use, but it was lacking scheduling and fault tolerance. So I started working on that. Was working on a bunch of schedulers and optimistic schedulers and pessimistic schedulers and whatnot. And someone showed me this project called Kubernetes in 2014, I believe. Right around the time it was open sourced. And I, even though it had a scheduler, but it had orchestration that I was not I wanted to build orchestration, but I was not focused on it seriously. That was very attractive. And even though the scheduler was not on par with an optimistic scheduler I was working on, did the job, and founded Overclock to take Kubernetes to market, right? So around that time frame, cloud was getting extremely prominent to a point it was taking over like sovereign data centers. So it was the scenario we were facing was, instead of people, the best analogy I could give is cars, right? Instead of people owning their own vehicles, cloud was this car rental company that would, give you cars for rent and zero ownership, right? That presents a few challenges. I mean, it can give you transportation, but it won't give you mobility, in the sense you will not be able to use a data center when you want them, and hyper concentration of power in a few players creates oligopolies, and we all know what oligopolies led to, right? It was a concern amongst us in the industry as well as academia. And the idea of supercloud was just getting formulated. I think Cornell wrote a paper in 2015. And we really like the idea of supercloud, that you can decouple the control plane from the execution plane or the resource plane, right? And reduce the cloud providers, both public as well as private, to resource providers, and not give away control, right? So that was very attractive. It aligned very well with the container infrastructure, container native infrastructure world that we all wanted to see come alive. And so, and another trend we started noticing was this enormous underutilization. So, we founded a company called Overclock Labs that I still work for in 2015 to take Kubernetes to market. And this is that early, right? So people haven't heard of Kubernetes. I mean, for context, Kubernetes is used by 80% of the cloud today. Back then, it was still a very, very early concept. I was invited to speak at the Kubernetes KubeCon, the first KubeCon ever held. There were 200 people there. So it was very early concept. And and I've written some open source code that is still very actively used by Kubernetes and Helm and HashiCorp Nomad and Terraform. I was a contributor to those early projects, right? And so we started noticing a pattern of heavy underutilization for for computer resources, somewhere north of 85 to 90% underutilization in data centers. So the idea of creating a marketplace coupled with a cloud was very attractive for us. And when we decided to do so, to really expose these resources in a way that they can be consumed by people that need these resources more than people that have them and not using them, putting a super cloud on top of it makes it easy to use for developers, right? So it was just a very natural sort of progression that, hey, 2015, we decided to do that. 2016, we kind of dabbled around building, experimentation or prototypes on Ethereum and whatnot. In fact, we actually built a blockchain by ourselves before Ethereum without realizing we built a blockchain. We had, we had like a BitTorrent style replication for state across different edge nodes, right? Because you need consistency in order for scheduling to happen. And then we did Merkle tree style integrity checks on data to ensure the integrity. And then, if you combine Merkle trees and BitTorrent, you end up with a blockchain. So we did not design a blockchain with intent, but we designed a system that would solve our edge replication problems and for distributed clusters, right? And then we found out about Ethereum in 2016, loved it. We did a prototype that massively failed because of scalability issues. Tendermint was sort of seemed pretty attractive in terms of what can offer to build a layer one. And then we, one of the first chains to use Tendermint. Tendermint became Cosmos SDK, one of the first chains to do Cosmos. Then IBC came around, or interblockchain communication came around. Akash was the first chain to implement IBC after Cosmos Hub. So first IBC transaction happened between Cosmos Hub and Akash. And it was just one after another. We were having problems, solving those problems, and blockchain happened to be a solution to the problem that we were trying to solve. So we did not start off as a crypto company. We started off as a cloud company. We still are a pretty cloud sort of project, right? Like, we don't consider ourselves to be a crypto native per se. We're really focused on solving a cloud problem. And
crypto are the payment rails and the scheduling rails, right?
Well, orchestration, we have coordination. I would say crypto is a coordination rail more than payment. Sure, payment is part of coordination, but it's really how do you distribute resources globally using blockchain as a layer that's consistent, that is immediately consistent, that is just from a pure database properties, right? Like it's a great data structure. The only data structure that we think that can allow permissionless writes really efficiently. I mean, probably DAG out there, but blockchain happens to be one of those data structures. And permissionless writes are important because they negate the need for a credential exchange during bootstrapping. And if you build distributed systems, you know how hard that is, right? So blockchain solve a lot of problems that we don't really like from a distributed systems and hyper scalable like edge data centers, right? We wanted to solve for a long time, and we don't really talk much about these incredible solutions blockchain provides. Yeah, so that's how we ended up in a blockchain.
That's a much longer story than I expected, and super interesting. So, what would you say is the sort of USP of Akash, if you had to, like, unique value proposition or unique selling proposition of Akash for various stakeholders? Like, could you give us a summary in a paragraph?
Number one unique selling proposition for Akash is access, open access, right? So today, why that's important is today, if you're a company trying to get GPUs, right, you on demand, it's impossible. You go to Amazon, they will not give it to you. You go to Lambda, they're sold out. You go to CoreWeave, they're sold out. It's impossible to get, right? Why? Because all these closed systems prioritize access in opaque manner. So the playing field is not leveled, right? So, but you come to Akash, you're guaranteed that you have priority, first come, first serve, right? There's no other, conditions that you're required to satisfy to get GPUs. So that alone tells you quite a lot. And GPUs are the fuel for AI. Without GPUs, there is no machine learning or AI, right? So if you think AI is going to be the most important technology stack of our modern society, access to AI is heavily controlled, and gate kept by a few players, and that's not a future I want to take. So Akash gives you access.
Totally agree.
Not only gives you access, but it gives you the best possible price because the pricing is done in the public. There is no, black box.
Opaque clearing.
Right. Yeah, it's very clear. So you know exactly what you're getting, and that's a very high value proposition for a lot of folks because for a lot of them, just getting access to GPUs is a big deal, right? Forget like what cost or price point you get. But from a price point, Akash, for CPUs or whatnot, it's 10 times cheaper than Amazon, right? So it's hyper cost efficient, and it's fully open source. That means if you want to see a feature that you want to build, or if you see a bug that you want to fix, you can come and do it yourself as an engineer, and that's very valuable for a lot of us engineers because having the sense of control and having the sense of sovereignty over my cloud is important to me as an engineer. I'm pretty sure a lot of developers in your audience will agree with that as well, right? So having open source gives me the comfort and the confidence for me to, believe in a software is going to be there for a long
staying
time.
Power.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
When I first encountered Akash, I thought it was a pretty unique take, like compared to like lots of the other blockchains and their sort of mission statements or their focus. Are there other projects like that I'm missing? Are there similar projects? Like, what would you, if you had to compare Akash, what would be your take?
So Akash is the only general purpose compute platform that I can think of. Flux is probably another one that's general purpose. They're doing pretty well as well. They are. So I would say the big difference between Akash and Flux is probably the permissionless aspect of it. So now that could change. I think they're working on some things, but the way it stands as of today is you can deploy any workload on Akash, but you have to select a workload you want to deploy on Flux. So with GPUs, Akash is also like a market for high density GPUs. So be it 49, be it H100s or A100s, which are the most advanced GPUs NVIDIA has ever made. Flux is more, the recently announced GPUs, I suppose. I think it's more consumer GPUs, right? So it's a healthy space. So I think there's quite a lot of room for healthy competition and cooperation, right? So we have incredible communities that support each other. From a non-general purpose compute, the closest project that people like to compare Akash is with Render, right? So being the GPU marketplace, the big difference between Render and Akash is general purpose, right? So Akash is general purpose, Render is not. But there's a notion that Render is. And in terms of revenue, I think Akash is the fastest growing and the most revenue generating. It's not very clear. I mean, Flux, I think, is about, don't remember the numbers, but last I checked was somewhere 1/4 of Akash's revenue, right? Or half. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on it. But when it comes to like growth, Akash is growing at 150% month over month. So obviously, I'm telling you, there is an incredible need for GPUs and compute out there, right? And I think another project comes to my mind is probably Golem. Golem is definitely the first one when it comes to GPU marketplaces, way before Render and whatnot. It is a failed project, right? It's not. I don't think founders or any of the team is working on it anymore. And that comes from usage. Usage even though it's a tail metric, tells you quite a lot about a project or whatnot. And I think Golem is making $15 or $10 a day in terms of fees. So I don't think anyone seriously is using Golem. Uh, um, the newer projects that are popping up, like in the sphere, I think one project that seems very interesting is Jensen. They got funding recently. They're still working on releasing something that we can see, but that does machine learning, specifically machine learning. It's not general purpose. It's specifically machine learning, and they do verifiability for machine learning models. So which is a very hard problem to solve, but very promising team and very promising aspects. So it's quite a lot of the field is spread quite a bit, but Akash is by far the most mature amongst general purpose compute systems.
The usage numbers, the growth you were talking about is super impressive. Do you guys have an inkling of where this demand is coming from? This small companies, people training their own models? Is this bigger companies wanting to, access the cards? Do you have an insight?
Yes, mostly smaller companies. Most companies that cannot get access to GPUs on Amazon. Right? So I mean, Semaphore is a incredible magazine. They are considered for their journalistic integrity. They are one of the top ones. They're a spinoff from Bloomberg. They wrote a report recently after interviewing Akash users about how some of the folks, there was a student from Columbia and there was a project called Thumper, all these companies, how hard it is for them to get on-demand access for A100s, right? So usually if you are not, funded, if you don't have $100 million in your bank account and not funded by Amazon, Google, or Microsoft, one of the big players, it's impossible to get high density compute. That's the reality. High density GPUs, right? So the users of Akash tend to be funded companies that cannot get these GPUs and want to get GPUs and on demand. So it's a very clear value proposition. A lot of them are not crypto companies. In fact, a lot of them are just traditional AI companies. Usually high growth companies, right? They are looking for a solution to their massive supply problem.
Demand for it, right? So let's flip this around. Like you've mentioned several times that Akash is significantly cheaper for the users, which is of course super important to win in the market. If we flip this around and look at the suppliers of the hardware, the providers, are they profitable? Like what's their perspective? Is this good for them?
Yes. So a lot of the providers are I would say two broad categories of providers, right? So one category of providers are hardware owners that purchase hardware for a purpose and that purpose doesn't seem to be fully satisfactory in terms of utilization. So a lot of times folks will have to over provision to address peak workloads, and using over provisioning, that means they have enormous supply, right? So Akash allows for them to earn income passively, maybe actively, for their underutilization, which most of the time they have underutilization, right? So we see a lot of crypto miners that are that purchase GPUs for either incredible proof of work mining that's not profitable anymore. So we see Foundry Digital, which is a DCG company, Grayscale folks. They're big Akash providers, and they bought a bunch of GPUs for Filecoin, I suppose. That didn't work out really well, and now they're repurposing that Filecoin GPUs for Akash. And then we have machine learning companies that either are doing machine learning training and are in between training cycles.
Right. They're not training 100% of the time.
They're not using their GPUs, or they're companies that are having long-term leases with one of the providers because it's impossible to get on-demand compute. Only way to get compute is to go into a term lease. And more often than not, and these term leases are very prohibitive in terms of when you get compute and how you get compute. So you have to prepay most of the time and wait for 3 to 4 months to get access to compute. So during that time, your needs change and whatnot, right? So you more often than not, and end up with compute that's not used. So we have providers like that. For them, any dollars they get is dollars in the bank. And then you have commercial vendors, right? Commercial vendors, be it OVH or like, I guess they don't do crypto anymore, but we have Oblivious and a lot of commercial vendors. For them, it's about.
But wait a minute. So providing GPU capacity, would that still fall into those like crypto sort of prohibitions like Hetzner has or OVH has? Wouldn't that be just, I'm providing computing power, and coincidentally, it's, it's for a cloud, but it's not crypto operation, is it?
People don't see the difference. I mean, people have.
Really?
It's usually some executive that higher up that has no idea what they're talking about, fighting against the crypto folks. It's just so much misinformation out there that people are privy. I mean, I don't know. People have their own biases and they're not willing to change. So it's not. I mean, that's going to change, right? I mean, that's
okay. Yeah, hopefully.
That takes time.
But you're saying there are commercial like pro providers that have racks of GPUs that are also they may put them onto the Akash market.
I think Oblivious is one of the big providers. They're very popular, and they have racks that they give into Akash. Equinix is another provider on Akash. We have a bunch of heavy hitters that are like, oh look, we have underutilized capacity, but GPUs are very hard to come by, so it's kind of most compute provided by these providers underutilized compute. So we have a wide range of providers, right? So for them, it's just take whatever they can get. Think about it, right? Like if a A100 costs about $11,000, if you're making $1,000 a month, which is about $1.40 an hour or $1.35 an hour, which is significantly, I mean, it's decent pricing, right, compared to any other providers out there. And a year amortization of the chip is very profitable if you think about any math you do compared to real estate, compared to any other like asset class. If you're getting back your money 100% within a year, I think that's a very profitable.
That's nice.
Right?
Yeah.
So now again, none of this is financial advice, and I'm not suggesting you go buy a bunch of GPUs and put it in Akash, but
if you could, even if you could buy them.
Yeah, there are other aspects of operation that could cost you money, but in general, like it's a very
power consumption
entity if you're talking about profitability as a question, right? So it's not even you can cut the cost by half, and that means you're still amortizing in 2 years, right? And if you look at a life of a GPU, it's about 5 to 6 years, right? You still have a lot of room to juice out profits from this GPU. So it works out really well, I think, for providers on Akash.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's an interesting arithmetic. You guys, I noticed, I even tested myself. You guys put out a GPU demo that it's got a Mistral model. It's got the mixture of experts, the sparse mixture of experts, and it's got the Mistral 7B model, right? It's the 7 billion parameter model. And I was immediately intrigued, so I went and tried it out. I was surprised immediately by the fact that it's just free to use. There's no sign up, so huge kudos for that. It's pretty amazing. Like all these companies trying to capture credentials, basically, to market you or whatever later. And this is really cool. So, why do you guys do that?
We wanted to demonstrate. So Akash is hard for non-developers to understand really what Akash does in the value proposition. I mean, as a developer, I mean, you know exactly what you're getting into. But as a non-developer, it's very hard to see the value prop. So we wanted to find a way to demonstrate access to these GPUs, right? And the best way, obviously, is to expose different types of applications you can build on top of Akash. So Chat or Akash Chat was built by a community member that was excited about using Akash, and he wanted to test out, different models on Akash, and built a general purpose chat client for a mixed set of models. And Mixtral is definitely the darling child of open source models right now, right? So, and we showcase, and the goal is to showcase across different GPUs, so you'll be able to have some degree of benchmarking. And so if you're thinking of building an app using Mistral, you should be able to go to Akash, chat Akash, and try out on different GPUs, see what the performance looks like. And based on that, you can deploy your own model, right? You can own instance of Mixtral that gives you unshared performance, right? So that's dedicated towards your application. A lot of folks, I think, if you're serious about like building hyperscale or applications that have decent scale, you need your own dedicated resources, right? So Akash Chat is a way to demonstrate the capabilities of the network. We also have SDXL or Akash Network. That's a diffusion model, Stable Diffusion XL, that you can use for image generation. It's very, very good. It's very similar to Midjourney, and it's fully free to use Akash. And I think next we're looking at multimodal approach, so you'll be able to do chat as well as images and several others.
Talk about images, analyze images. Yeah, that sounds.
Yeah.
That sounds
With chat
pretty
interfaces,
interesting.
really fun.
So the SD model, the Stable Diffusion, that's already online, or is that the next in line sort of thing you guys are working on?
SDXL.Akash.network.
SDX.Akash.network.
SDXL, so Stable Diffusion XL. SDXL.Akash.network.
All right, I didn't know that. That's
You
pretty
should
cool.
get better at marketing, and like people should know all this stuff. I suppose, but we're fixing that.
Yeah, I'll definitely test that out. So one last thing I have about the sort of GPU/AI part of this is, are any companies using Akash also for training? Because there's an additional challenge of having sort of storage that's attached in tightly to the GPU compute, so you can load training samples in batches effectively and actually train or find. So I feel like there are three different workloads that I'd sort of separate out. One is sort of the heavy foundation model training, like I want to train on Llama or whatever. Second one is fine tuning, which I guess is sort of more, interesting for non-huge enterprises, which would be, I already have a trained model and I have some data and I want to just like sort of nudge the model in the right direction. And then there's inference, right? So I have a trained model, and then what I want to do is I want to use this model to perform whatever it was trained for. So like, taking these three sort of use cases, what would you recommend Akash for most?
So Akash is, as a matter of fact, all three use cases Akash is actually solving right now. So there's a company called Thumper that's doing a foundational model training on Akash. It consumes about 24,100 hours. So it is not millions of hours like GPT-4 or whatnot, but it is still a foundation model, and it is a small model, right? So there's this new trend called small SLMs, like small language models, which are actually pretty good at specific tasks compared to like LLMs, right? I don't know if you know, but ChatGPT is getting significantly worse at coding. It forgot how to code after a while because I don't know why, but yeah, it's interesting to see that, hey, it's not how advanced or how new a model that determines the quality. It's really how you train it. So SLMs are taking a center stage now, especially, and Akash is great for that because you don't need to sign long contracts and get all these resources. You can just deploy an SLM and train an SLM on Akash, and then you have fine tuning, which demands about, I don't know, like 10 minutes of dedicated GPU time, which is easy to acquire in Akash, right? So fine tuning is a process of customizing a LLM or an SLM to your needs. And Akash is great. People are using Akash for that. And inference is obviously the least demanding in terms of computation resources and most flexible. An inference job on Mixel will take maybe 3 to 4 seconds per inference call. So you should be able to run inference fairly well. I mean, you see Akash Chat and Akash, the SDX on Akash as great inference examples, right? So Akash is, of course, not optimal for LLM foundational training in terms of size, right? Like, so if you're, I think doing over 1 billion parameters, Akash may not be great. I mean, you need local clusters and you need dedicated time for large local clusters to solve the latency problems. And the world is getting to solve those problems, but we're not there yet. So that's a bit challenging with Akash. So yeah, but Akash will be great for most AI use cases. I think very little stuff that you cannot do on Akash. today?
Yeah, I think we're going to see, that's like just an inserted slot from my side. I think we're going to see like better models becoming also smaller. And so it's easier to train a bigger model than a smaller model that's been established in machine learning for a while. So it's actually those parameters are useful when training, but you don't necessarily need to keep all of them when you're doing inference or fine tuning. However, most of the companies that are putting out these LLMs are also companies that are selling cloud power. Right. And if you're reducing a model, you sell less cloud. So I'll leave everyone to draw their own conclusions. But the only one who's building out and putting out smaller models is Facebook. That doesn't sell any cloud. So I think there's in my mind, Akash is going to be in a sweet spot when the techniques are perfected to build slightly smaller models, which may have still pretty good explanatory and fitting power. Anyway, so back to sort of Akash, like what's your next focus? What are you guys building right now? What's going to be the next milestone that Akash is going to release that we can look forward to?
So Akash is having incredible growth, right? I mean, we're growing at 150% month over month. Our utilization is about 43% cumulative daily average utilization for GPUs, which is fairly incredible, right? Compared to any other deep networks, right? And I think the closest comparison for GPU power comes Render, and that Render has about 0.8% utilization as reported by the providers. So Akash 45% gives you a good idea as to how Akash is being used. And out of that, the high density chips for A100s, I think the utilization is about 95+% average, daily average. Mm-hmm. So we obviously, that's great as the most utilized network, but that's bad for the tenants because the shelves are empty in a market, and that's not good. So our big priority right now is to increase supply. And the way we're going to do that is through incentives, which crypto is incredible at it. I mean, you saw Killiam demonstrating how incentives can bootstrap a network, have mappers out of the world. Filecoin is a great example of using incentives to bootstrap network. And Akash is pre-incentive, and we have not done incentives because learning from the mistakes of the previous generation deepen projects, we learned that unless you validate demand, incentivizing supply will lead to wastage. So we want to avoid
case, Filecoin incentives were used to bootstrap Akash, based on what you're saying, right? With those GPUs from Foundry now coming on Akash.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it too. But it doesn't serve the purpose of the original network that introduced the incentive, right? So validating demand before supply was a critical decision we did. Now that we have validated demand, we can open up supply and be incentivizing folks to give your A100s and get guaranteed payment of some degree. So we're releasing a pilot in Q1 2024. Mm-hmm. Ideally January. So that opens up the possibilities. I think that's going to massively bootstrap supply on Akash. And we have about $300 million in budget on chain for deploying these incentives. And glad we waited this long, and market is starting to turn a tide here as well. So that means more dry powder for Akash, right? So incentives are going to be huge along with that distribution. So making it extremely simple to use Akash. Akash is very good to use if you're a crypto native user, but if you're not crypto native, Akash is very hard to use, right? So we're changing that.
KT somewhere, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we're changing that quite a lot, and there are new applications that are being built on top of Akash, makes it super simple to use Akash. There are Overclock Labs itself is building another application on top of Akash that makes it super simple. So there are quite a lot of irons in the fire to make it super simple. So the theme for 2024 is acceleration. Akash accelerates, and both in terms of supply as well as demand. Supply is through incentives, demand is through better user experience, right? And we have other key features that are coming that, don't want to get into nuances, but that address certain pitfalls or certain trade-offs that people have to make so far to use Akash. Hopefully they don't need to after these upgrades, like private containers, like node attribute exposure. And there's quite a lot of features people asked for Akash that's coming out based on customer feedback, right? So, but the bigger theme is acceleration, both in terms of supply as well as demand.
Yeah, so here's to hoping you guys get tons of those GPUs on the open market and we can get to use them. I mean, we're definitely going to be looking to use some GPUs to train some AI models in Q1 2024 ourselves. We'll definitely look to Akash to get that capacity. Well, fingers crossed that you guys get all that on board and turbocharge Akash to increase the power.
That'd be great.
Super. So that was a great chat, Greg. Thanks very much for coming on. Super cool to have you.
Thank you so much. It was fun.